Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another Saturday night dars at 9 p.m. Australia time, and we thank you for joining from around the world. And tonight, inshallah, we will be reading from the 11th ray. We'll be doing a combination of the 4th topic and the 6th topic. So initially I'll begin with understanding that our life is merely to worship Allah and to obtain His praise, and then we will be stepping into science and how science explains Allah and how we must see science in our day-to-day lives. Whereas when we look at society today, we focus on the what, but don't understand the reason behind of the what. And whereas we don't focus on the why, such as there is rain, yes there is rain, but why is there rain? And so on. So inshallah together we can all come through and benefit. Life's capital is very little, and the work to be done is much. There are spheres one within the other, like concentric circles, interlocking circles. From the sphere of man's heart and stomach, and that of his home and body, and that of the quarter in which he lives, and his town, and his country, and land, and the globe and mankind. Life's capital is very little, and the work to be done is much. There are spheres, one within the other, like concentric circles. From the sphere of man's heart and stomach, to that of his home and body, to that of the quarter in which he lives and his town, to his country and land, and the globe and mankind, to the spheres of animate beings, other creatures, and the world. Each person, each one of us, may have duties in each of those spheres, but the most important and permanent of these are those in the smallest sphere. Here Ustad is also mentioning the importance of personal development and continuing to do those which matter most in our little circles. Each person may have duties in each of those spheres, but the most important and permanent of these are those in the smallest sphere, which is in ourselves. While his least important and temporary duties may be in the largest sphere. According to this analogy, the largest and smallest are in inverse proportion. Sometimes we believe we have a higher purpose and we forget our small principal acts that we must do. Sometimes we focus too much on things which we don't have control over, whereas we don't put effort and control into things which we have control over, such as Iman, our 5 daily prayers, and respecting our parents, and all those daily acts of Islam which we must do. But because of the attractiveness of the large sphere, it causes the person to neglect his important, necessary duties in the small sphere. The big sphere busies him with unnecessary, trivial, peripheral matters. It destroys the capital of his life for nothing. What benefit would it have if we could rule the world but died without Iman? It kills his precious life on worthless things. Sometimes the one following curiously the struggles of war comes to earnestly support one side. He looks favorably on their tyranny and becomes part of it. An event more momentous than this world war in relation to World War II, and a case more important than that of the world supremacy, has been opened over the heads of everyone, and especially Muslims. And this is the case of Iman and dying as a Muslim. Living and dying as a Muslim. We will now be going over to this topic, the 6th topic, where we will be discovering how to see Allah in the sciences in which we are taught in our schools, in our educational institutions. One time in Kastamonu, a group of high school students came to me. They said, "Tell us about our Creator. Our teachers do not speak of God, of Allah." I said to them, "All the sciences you study continuously speak of Allah and make known their Creator, each with its own particular tongue. Do not listen to your teachers. Listen to the science." A group of high school students came to me and said, "Tell us about our Creator. Our teachers do not speak of God." And as we can see in contemporary society, there is very little mentioning of God, and we actually are taught in our schools that science is king, and we actually speak about this scientific ceiling effect, whereby we only believe what we can see. We look at the what, but we do not look at the why. We don't look at the reasoning behind, the wisdom behind a science, a particular science happening. And here Ustad has explained. He says, all the sciences you study continuously speak of God and make known the Creator, each with its own particular tongue. Here Ustad gives us a different mentality whereby we use the science that the atheist teaches, and with the science that he teaches us, we see Allah. It gives us a unique perspective on science and the Western world, and science altogether. For example, a well-equipped pharmacy with life-giving potions and cures in every jar, weighed out in precise and wondrous measures, doubtlessly shows an extremely skillful, practiced, and wise pharmacist. In the same way, to the extent that it is bigger and more perfect and better stocked than the pharmacy in the marketplace, the pharmacy of the globe of the earth, with its living potions and medicaments in the jars, which are the 400,000 species of plants and animals, shows and makes known to the eyes that are even blind, by means of the measure of the scale of science of medicine which we study, the all-wise one of glory, who is the pharmacist of the mighty pharmacy of the earth. Here Ustad is comparing modern day pharmacy compared to the pharmacy of Allah Azza wa Jal. Here he states, modern day pharmacy is a well-equipped pharmacy, whereas in comparison to Allah, who has a pharmacy with life-giving potions, living potions and cures in every single jar, in every single corner of the earth. The pharmacy of the globe has living potions and medicaments in the jars. That pharmacy has 400,000 species of plants and animals, which shows the all-wise one of glory, who is the pharmacist of the mighty pharmacy of the earth. To take another example, a wondrous factory which weaves thousands of sorts of cloth from a simple material, doubtless makes known a manufacturer and skillful mechanic. In the same way, to whatever extent is larger and more perfect than the human factory. This traveling dominical machine, known as the globe of the earth, with its hundreds of thousands of heads, in each of which are hundreds and thousands of factories, shows and makes known by means of the measure or scale of the science of engineering which you study, its manufacturer and owner. Here Allah is comparing factories. He is comparing engineering to which we can do with our human ability compared to which Allah Azza wa Jal does with by Himself. The science of engineering cannot compare to Allah Azza wa Jal, as Allah Azza wa Jal weaves thousands of sorts of cloth from a simple material with hundreds of thousands of heads, each in which are hundreds of thousands of factories. Here he compares how Allah Azza wa Jal has created the whole world, whereas an engineer can only create one certain product in one specific field, whereas Allah Azza wa Jal has created the whole world. It shows the most beauteous and most perfect manufacturer and owner. And for example, a depot, a store or shop in which has been brought together and stored up in regular and orderly fashion 1,001 varieties of provisions, undoubtedly makes known a wondrous owner, proprietor and overseer of provisions and foodstuffs. We see a shop like Coles with a variety of food products and other products which we use in our daily lives, and we agree that they are the best shop. In just the same way, to whatever degree is vaster and more perfect than such a little store such as Coles in comparison to the earth, this food store, this source of food and sustenance for humanity, of the most merciful one, known as the globe of the earth, this divine ship, this dominical depot and shop holding goods, equipment, conserved food, which in 1 year travels regularly an orbit of 24,000 years, and carrying groups of beings requiring different foods and passing through the seasons on its journey, and filling the spring with thousands of different provisions like a huge wagon, brings them to the wretched, animate creatures whose sustenance has been exhausted in the winter. By means of the measure or scale of the science of economics which we study, this depot of the earth makes known and makes loved its manager, organizer and owner. If we compare a small company like Coles, which can only be enough for one suburb, compared to what Allah Azza wa Jal has created for the whole world, for every single ecosystem, for every single creature, which we don't even know about, can it be compared? But through economics, which we see that through making shops and depots, Allah Azza wa Jal has created a world which can sustain all of us participating in business daily. All the materials that we use day to day can only come from the globe which Allah Azza wa Jal has created with His wisdom. So the study of economics shows how powerful the creative power Allah Azza wa Jal has. And for example, let us imagine an army which consists of 400,000 nations. And each nation requires different provisions, uses different weapons, wears different uniforms, undergoes different drills, trainings, and is discharged from its duties differently. Let us imagine an army which consists of 400,000 nations. Not 400,000 people, 400,000 different nations with different abilities, different needs, different weapons. So 400,000 different teams which wear different uniforms and undergoes different trainings and have different missions. If this army and camp has a miracle working commander who on his own provides all those different nations with all their different provisions, all their different needs, all their different weapons, all their different uniforms, and all their different equipment, without forgetting or confusing any of them, then surely the army and camp can show the commander and make him loved appreciatively. Here he's speaking about a 400,000 team army with a commander who gives each team their specific uniform, their needs, their training, their weapons, without confusing or forgetting them. Is it possible for one person to manage 400,000 different teams without forgetting or mixing any of their requirements, which are all specific to each individual? In just the same way, the spring camp of the face of the earth, in which every spring a newly recruited divine army of 400,000 species of plants and animals are given their varying uniforms, rations, food, sustenance, weapons, training. You don't see a horse learning how to walk over a 1-year period. You see a horse being born and learning to walk in a significantly short amount of time. Where did this training come from? They are each given their varying uniforms. They are given their food. They are given their ecosystems which have been created. We might not focus on these things because we are focused on our own life. But if we are to look into studies of ecosystems, we see that these animals live on their own. Why do they live on their own? How do they learn to feed themselves? How do they learn to arm themselves? How do they learn to protect themselves? Demobilizations in utterly perfect and regular fashion. They are sent by a single commander-in-chief who does not forget not one of them. We see this, and it's actually extremely funny, that humans love going to places where the human hand hasn't touched, because we see a perfect ecosystem which isn't altered. We see it is perfectly clean. We see it's perfectly functioning. We go to the oceans do not smell. They are maintained. They are clean. We only see that the only time dirt or an imbalance in the ecosystem occurs when a human enters there, such as the oil spills in our oceans. We don't see an oil spill happening or a dirt forming in a place where humans don't go and alter the ecosystem. It shows a perfect commander-in-chief who does not forget nor confuse one of them. To whatever extent the spring camp of the face of the earth is vaster and more perfect than that human army, by means of the measure or scale of the military science which we study, it makes known to the attentive and sensible its ruler, sustainer, administrator, most holy commander, causing wonderment and acclaim, and makes him loved and praised and glorified. We glorify nature so much because we claim that it is perfect, but we don't see that the perfection behind it, the ecosystem perfection, the growth, the four element perfection, the nature working, the astronomy working, everything working together is only an act of Allah Azza wa Jal. We don't see that there is a perfect commander-in-chief behind it. Whereas if we are to look at nature itself, why is nature acting in this way? Where is the brain of nature? Where is the brain of these animals? Why don't these animals alter the ecosystem such as the human? We may be weak, but a lion cannot touch us, although a lion could eat us and cause us harm. This brain that we have, we need to contemplate and understand the reasoning behind these sciences to understand how Allah operates and answer that question of why. Another example is the millions of electric lights that move and travel through a wondrous city. Their fuel and power source never being exhausted. So imagine millions of electric lights that move and travel through a wondrous city without a fuel nor power source, although they never run out of energy, self-evidently make known a wonder-working craftsman and extraordinarily talented electrician who manages the electricity, makes the moving lamps, sets up the power source, brings the fuel. They cause others to congratulate and applaud him and to love him. We can see this in contemporary society with people's admiration of people who are innovators, such as Nikola Tesla, who actually innovated technology in current modern society. But we don't look at the world where we see that this electricity actually existed for centuries, since the start of creation of time. We don't see that electricity actually works on its own, and we can only rather shape and use it in form of the internet, lights, heat, and all these other methods. We have the minimal effects in controlling electricity. Whereas, who created electricity? Why is electricity present? We've placed extreme importance on people who just find mere little findings, but we don't actually give the respect that is required to Allah, and we over-respect these people, even though they are respect-worthy. We give them extreme credit, and we don't look to the reason of the creation. We don't look to the reason that Allah Azza wa Jal created this with wisdom. And this man has worked and found this product. And then we give them excessive love without understanding that Allah Azza wa Jal. So it comes back to the first word. What can we do to understand and praise Allah for something that He has given us and another has introduced it to us? So what can we do? In just the same way, although some of the lamps of the stars in the roof of the palace of the world in the city of the universe, if they are considered in the way that astronomy says, are 1,000 times larger than the earth and move 70,000 times faster than a cannonball, they do not spoil their order, nor collide with one another, nor become extinguished, nor is their fuel exhausted. Said Nursi here compared our small science of electricity with the science, the creation of Allah, of the universe and astronomy. We can't control electricity, and electricity sometimes causes fires because we don't know how to handle it. Whereas Allah Azza wa Jal, He controls. He controls, Ustad's referring to stars as lamps here, which are electric lights. That's how he's comparing the electricity to the creation of Allah, to understand how perfect and powerful Allah is in creation. Although some of the stars in the sky, if they are considered as to what astronomy is saying, are 1,000 times larger than the earth, and they move 70,000 times faster than a cannonball, and yet they do not spoil their order, they don't collide with one another, nor become extinguished, nor is their fuel exhausted. We see that whenever Allah creates something, He creates it in the most perfect order. Even though that one star is 1,000 times larger than the earth, such as the sun, it stays in its spot and it respects and worships Allah and it listens to Allah's orders. Whereas we cannot even control electricity to the point where we can't stop it from killing us, we can't stop it from starting a fire. It shows the difference in power, and it shows through understanding electricity, through understanding astronomy, we should see Allah Azza wa Jal in these sciences and see how perfect He is, how large and how beautiful His creative power is, and how just He is. According to astronomy, which you study, for our sun to continue burning, which is 1,000,000 times larger than the earth, and 1,000,000 times older, and is a lamp and stove in one guest house of the most merciful one. So for a sun to keep burning, it needs as much oil as the seas of the earth, and as much coal as its mountains, or as many logs or much wood as 10 earths are necessary for it not to be extinguished. We leave our car lights on for about 12 hours, and all of that lithium battery capacity inside of our car finishes. Why doesn't the sun's electricity source, why doesn't the sun's heat source, why doesn't its light source run out? What is maintaining this sun source? Whereas we can't even sustain our homes. When the generator goes down, we have no more electricity. Where is this electricity? Why, if we're so developed in this field of electricity, why can't we sustain it? Here it shows the power of Allah. And however much greater and more perfect than this example are electric lamps of the palace of the world in the majestic city of the universe, which point with their fingers of light to an infinite power and sovereignty, which illuminates the sun and other lofty stars like it would without oil, wood or coal, not allowing them to be extinguished or to collide with one another. Although traveling together at that speed, to that degree, by means of the measure of the science of electricity, which you either study or will study, or which we use in our day-to-day lives, they testify to and make known the monarch, illuminator, the director, the maker of the mighty exhibition of the universe. They make Him loved, glorified and worshipped. Inshallah, I'll be finishing off with a small bit from the 4th topic again, which explains the importance of Iman and knowing that we must utilize our life in establishing in the knowledge of Allah and Iman and dying with Iman, inshallah. Since we Risale-i Nur students know it would be pure lunacy to give up the duties which will win this case of Iman at the moment where our soul is going to be taken from our body. and abandon the wondrous lawyer who saves 99% from losing that case of Iman and the task with which the lawyer employs us in, and become involved in peripheral trivia, unnecessary informational trivia, unnecessary knowledge which doesn't benefit our akhirah, as though we were going to remain in the world forever. This can also be with accumulating wealth. This can also be with spending our lives in a way which isn't beneficial to our akhirah. We are certain that if each of us had intelligence 100 times greater that we will have, we would still only use it to perfect ourselves and benefit ourselves and grow ourselves in Iman, and use life's capital, which is very little, and to work on the things which must be done in order to attain the rida, in order to attain Allah Azza wa Jall's happiness for us, and for Him to accept us and our duties, and for Him to inshallah put us into His Jannah. May Allah allow us to be of those who recognize Allah Azza wa Jalla in all of the sciences, in all of our daily lives, and inshallah be of those who think of Him and adhere to His religion and follow His Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Allah Azza wa Jalla Fatiha.